Okay, thank you everyone for kind of coming this evening. Thanks for Tony and the Linux Recruit team for the invite. You're in for a very rare treat. Half an hour of high quality ITV content, and I promise you no adverts in sight. I should introduce myself. I'm Tom Clark. I'm head of Common Platform at ITV. I've been working in technology for almost 20 years now, straight as a fresh-faced 17-year-old into my first job as a Windows sysadmin for Jaguar cars. Now, one of those things I like to think was quite cool, one of them less so. I'll let you guess which I think is which. I survived about 3 years looking at beautiful cars and less beautiful systems before moving into the world of contracting as a Perl developer, which was an interesting step when you're 19 years old. There we go, got a fan, thank you. But it's been quite a few years now since my last one-liner. I moved through kind of various organisations, large and small. The BBC, I used to kind of run bbc.co.uk back in 2005. Global Radio, a number of startups, all of which failed because they're startups. And then finally kind of coming into ITV, where I'm head of Common Platform. You can see my Twitter handle there. Please feel free to tweet me. It really makes my mother very proud. And I say that quite often. At one time, hashtag #HiTom'sMum actually was trending for a while at one conference. I should talk a little bit about ITV. I'm sure you all know and love it. Originally founded in 1955, we're a producer broadcaster, which basically means we make stuff and we distribute it around the world. Many of you will have known it as Channel 3 growing up. Some nods in the audience. I wasn't allowed to because it was far too common, but I'm allowed to watch it now because my mum and dad don't tell me what to watch. That'd be weird. We're a member of the FTSE 100. We turn over about £3 billion a year. That's a whole lot of Love Island. And we are, like I said, a member of the FTSE 100. But we do quite a lot with very little. We've only got about 5,500 employees around the world. Lots of freelancers and contractors on top. And again, being a commercial broadcaster, we have a very wide spectrum of content from good to less good. And I'll let you decide which it is. So, what is a common platform, and what is the common platform? So I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson. So cast your mind back, if you will, to 2015, a happier time, if you will. And ITV decided they needed a modernization program. Why? It's because things like this, the lifeblood of ITV, the things that makes a television company tick, were really kind of causing us serious issues. So our airtime sales system. Airtime is the term we use for the adverts you see on there. It was impossible to work with and impossible to change. So people were overloading fields because it took 6 months to get any changes into the system. Not good. Content sales, that's £1.5 billion worth of revenue. Again, a nightmare to change. And then finally, talent payments, the system we use to pay Ant and Dec and the other ones as well. It's where the 1.5 billion goes to. The problem with that was, well, the mainframe it ran on, we couldn't find spare parts on eBay anymore, and we had to virtualize it. And then we realized it's written in COBOL. Anyone actually knows what COBOL is? Has anyone written COBOL? Oh, okay, that's, yeah, sure. You need therapy or something. But the problem we had there, our developers were literally dying out. And, you talk about business risk, that's it. So we decided we needed a modernization program. Great. So, like kind of many companies, we went through a load of change, and I'm sure anyone who's done like large modernization programs will recognize these transitions. Moving from project-based to product-based, that's kind of cool. Moving from CapEx to OpEx, anyone who cares about money might care about those things as well. Dev and ops, or dev versus ops to DevOps, etc. All these kind of things we decided we want to do to ourselves. Sounds a bit weird when you phrase it like that. But we were doing this product team migration. Should we just let everyone go off and do their own thing and do all of these things their own way? We decided it might end up a bit like this. We've got 3 product teams, I can't even count, 4 product teams, try again, take 2, on the screen. And you can see they've been left to their own devices and they've reinvented some wheels. Blue team, okay, 3 sides on their wheel, not so good. The kind of the orange-yellow team here, they've got 6 sides, so they're twice as good, but still shit. And all the grey stuff on that diagram is the boring stuff. It's kind of the platform stuff. It's the logging, it's the alerting, it's the monitoring, it's the deployment pipelines, the kind of the escalation systems, the security compliance. Like, you don't really want them reinventing the wheels because it's not kind of cool business value. And the effect is, actually, with the other teams they work with, you get one team and they have a point-to-point relationship. So that's fine. We've got one team here, and they talk to the audit teams and the cyber teams, which sounds weird when and so add more teams, and you end up like this, and the whole thing's an absolute kind of rat's nest of complexity because everyone's reinventing the wheel. So I thought, let's do a common platform. Here it is. And the idea was, instead of actually having kind of these 4 people reinventing the wheels, let's have a platform that they can all kind of work on. So here she is, she develops the common platform, and her mandate is to produce a brilliant round wheel and share it with everyone else. So again, that logging, the alerting, the monitoring, the things like that, they produce it, everyone else uses it, and you can see they've actually got more time in their day to actually kind of deliver business value, which is what our shareholders care about. And so you see this kind of rat's nest of a kind of diagram here. It looks a bit more like this. And there's always that exceptional team, the one who doesn't like it, the one who wants to do it their own way. That'll always exist in every company. Great. Now we've got the tech, we need some people to run it. So there's really 2 things I look for on my team. You've got to be smart. Okay, so I define that as the ability to adapt to change. Tech moves pretty quickly, right? And you've got to be smart to keep up. And you've got to be kind. Essentially, don't be a dick. Because, you've got to maximize for IQ and EQ. If you've got someone on the team who is super smart but doesn't want to share that knowledge, do you really want to work with them? And so platform engineers kind of exist at the intersection of those 2. But I will kind of come on to that kind point later. So what do we do with these lovely, smart and kind platform engineers? We've kind of got 2 things we do to them. Again, when I phrase it like that, it sounds weird, but we have the core team that operate at ITV, and they have a number of kind of responsibilities. So they curate the platform. They're the people that build that toolkit. Some people refer to it as a center of excellence. I like to think all of my engineers are excellent anyway. So they produce the toolkit that everyone uses. Great. They incubate new hires. So a new person joins the team. They spend their first week in the core team, learning the ropes, asking those silly questions you always ask on day 1, and getting set up before we drop them into a product team. Second opinion as a service. It's like rubber duck debugging. If you actually want to bounce ideas off someone, if you're out in the sticks, they're there to do that. It's their job to be interrupted and to sit with you and coach you and answer your questions. Flex. They can go to the gym with, no. The idea is, because the platform is so common, they can be parachuted in at a moment's notice to save the day. So if someone's ill for an extended time or going on holiday, or a product or project actually just needs some extra resource, because it's so common, we can send them in. And then finally, research and development, keeping the platform evergreen, which is a terrible word, and I don't know why I said it. I think it's a Gartner thing. But the idea is they kind of keep the platform up to date with the latest trends. Cool. Everyone nodding? Makes sense? Good? Great. Now, the field platform engineers, these are actually kind of the vast majority of my team. They are actually out embedded in our product development teams, and I'm sure many of you develop in a product mindset, but if you don't, the idea is they can kind of operate like a mini startup. So you have a product owner, delivery manager, lovely developers with their halos on, and then a very cool platform engineer embedded there as well. What do they do on that team, I hear you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's the next slide. Historically, back in 2015, many of our developers had never seen production before. They didn't know what it was. They were a little bit afraid of it. I said, don't worry, we'll give you a platform engineer, they'll help you. And so they do have kind of an operations responsibility within that product team, but they do build it and run it. But the idea is they're not the only responder. They're meant to grab the developer and say, look what your code did, and then help them make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's one aspect of the role, but one we want to diminish. They act as force multipliers, which is something I've stolen from the military. The idea is they make the team more effective and efficient than they'd be if they weren't there. Okay, that makes sense. That's something quite cool and quite rewarding. And then finally, they're quality influencers. There's lots of emojis in this talk, I'm sorry. They're quality influencers or guardians. They're meant to be the people there on day 0 when we're designing a new microservice, all the way to the left saying, think about exponential backoff, please. Or like, have you considered a circuit breaking pattern? And doing all these kind of things, whispering in their ears to kind of make sure they're kind of doing cool things like that from day 0. Great. But problem 1, lonely engineers. 95% of my team's time in those product teams is spent not with platform engineers, and that's a bit lonely. They love their developer kind of colleagues, but actually they don't get much opportunity to work directly with platform engineers. We have Slack channels, it's full of cat memes like all of your Slack channels are, but actually 95% of the time is not spent with people like you. So that's not great, and you have less chance to learn through osmosis because you're not working with people who are kind of asking the same kind of questions. It's especially true in our Leeds and Manchester offices, especially in Manchester when they're the only platform engineer in the village building. So problem number 1, lonely platform engineers. Moving on to the tech, we are big open source fans, and you have to remember this is 2015 when I'm starting to this. So look, we've got some great open source components, and we thought that's kind of great, that's really nice. Lots of things off the shelf. which we glued together with an ITV glue. And so, it was a bespoke platform. There's V1. But it did mean that if you wanted to learn it, there was a bit of a learning curve because it was our secret sauce. Some, I think, unfairly refer to it as a learning wall. I think that's slightly unfair. But this is where the kindness thing comes back to haunt us. Because some people say an overplayed strength can be a weakness. And so we've got these kind platform engineers who want to help, and they want to be kind, and they want to kind of help everyone out. So the platform was always designed to be self-served by the developers. They were supposed to be able to dig into the Puppet, and the Hyra, and the YAML, and the Terraform, and figure out it, and do a microservice themselves. So some of them did actually do it, and some of them kind of figured it out, and they said, oh, this is fun learning Puppet. Someone said, oh, I'm a bit busy right now. Do you think you could help me with it? And so the platform engineer was helpful, and the platform engineer did. And so eventually over time, they kept doing that. And it went from being, I can do that, to the platform engineer does that. And so we got the developers there. This is how they got onto the platform. Through the platform engineer, they become a blocker, and we ended up with platform engineer as a service. Instead of platform as a service, like we'd always intended. What had we done wrong? We were doing so much ops stuff, there wasn't much time left in the day for the force multiplier, for the quality stuff. People were very sad. Into problem 3, poor developer experience, DevX. We'd built, as platform engineers, a really reliable hosting platform. But we'd forgotten, and like 4 nines, great, lovely, but we'd forgotten that most of the change was at the input side, at the development side. That's where all the kind of stuff was happening. The actual production side didn't change very often, but we had made it really reliable. So cycle times to production were long, 15 minutes. And so some people are like, that's really quick. No, our developers would, they didn't like that. And sometimes deployments would fail, mostly thanks to M Collective. Rest in peace. Meanwhile, back on the core team, in 2015, we had 6 product teams. So again, they weren't responsible for anything, they weren't depending on them, but they would often be consulted, they'd be asked questions, there'd be second opinioning as a servicing, that makes sense. So 2015, 6 teams, that's fine. And we didn't actually have anyone officially on the core team. We had a virtual core team because people didn't believe it kind of made sense at the time. So then we get, into 2016, 13 teams. We've more than doubled, and we've got 1 person on the core team. The year after, we've got 2 more product teams hosted. And remember, those product teams have a load of developers, and each one has a platform engineer, all kind of asking questions of the core team, all being incubated, all need that second opinion as a service, and often needing that flex resource. Again, up to 2018, 18 teams, but we've got another platform engineer there. But today, 20 product teams at ITV hosted on the platform, 4 engineers. But look, it's very pretty, but it's quite painful. And so it meant that we were doing all of our time doing this, and not much time doing that. And the issue with that was, I'm sure you're familiar with the technology adoption lifecycle curve here. You can see we like to consider ourselves early adopters, like fast followers. We're not innovating, but we are fast followers. But something is very important to point out here. To maintain that space takes constant effort. You have to be working every single day to just stay still. So the cost of agility in your organization is constant iteration, integration, constant gardening and weeding of your systems in order to stay precisely still. If you stop and you take your foot off the gas, you slip backwards. And we did. And so it meant that problem 4, yesterday's tech, we had a well-maintained classic car of a platform because we thought Sensor was still cool. Everyone else was driving around in their Teslas using this data dog thing. Crazy. So it kind of made me kind of realize something. And I'm going to read this out and see if I can click it in the right order and it kind of comes through. Do something when you can afford to, not when you can't afford not to. I'll read it again. Do something when you can afford to, not when you can't afford not to. So we were so busy being busy, the shoulds and the coulds, like the R&D, always got pushed down the list because we didn't have enough people. We were always so busy until the shoulds and the coulds weren't. Until the shoulds and the coulds suddenly became musts because we hadn't done them. And suddenly we were having to react. We realized that the common platform was the platform we needed, but not the platform we wanted. Because ultimately the platform we wanted was no platform at all. We wanted to evaporate it away, constantly integrating all the latest technology, the PaaS services, the SaaS services, so the layer got kind of thinner and thinner, and eventually we could all retire or kind of evaporate into some kind of non-corporeal state. That's kind of what we do at ITV, this is how we roll. So here, we've got the kind of the 4 problems I kind of mentioned that we're going to try to address. It's red alert, we'd been hearing but not listening. We were too busy being busy. The signal had been lost in the noise. The PEs weren't happy because they were doing all their time turning it off and on again instead of doing kind of the cool quality stuff. The developers weren't happy for all the reasons I just mentioned. So I staged an intervention and I said, we need to talk about common platform. Because the first step is admitting you have a problem. I was like, mea culpa to the developers. I don't like it either. We don't like it either, because some of them thought we thought this was cool. And we said, contrary to popular belief, we don't like turning it off and on again all the time. We don't like running stuff. We'd rather not. So we kind of said, let's do a roadshow. We were going to call it I'm a platform engineer, get me out of here, but the kind of the brand team said that's not acceptable. But we did do a roadshow. We went around our various development sites, and we said, let's do a retro and find out what's working, what isn't. Cool. Net Promoter Score. Would you recommend this platform to a friend? Teams have got really weird friends. And then feature requests, things you think the platform should be doing, which it doesn't today. And everyone joined in. Everyone kind of got the message. We're trying to make this better. It's really important that you engage. So they said, we want you to be a bit more transparent. We know you're doing cool stuff and we haven't been hacked yet, so you must be doing that pretty well. But actually, what are you doing? I want to learn more about it. And we said, okay, that's a really good point. We do cool stuff. We should talk about it some more. Okay, fine, we can do that. We want to be more empowered to self-serve. It's like, that was the point. But obviously, we'd done a really bad job of it. So we said, okay, fine, we'll fix that this time too. And we've got a Net Promoter Score of 3.1. So Net Promoter Score goes from like 1 through to 5. And 3.1 was actually kind of like neither agree or disagree. It's okay. One person actually rated us a 5. And I said, where the hell have you come from that you think this is better than... And it was a bank, apparently. And so a feature request, faster deployments. They wanted less than 15 minutes to kind of get into an environment. Yeah, we can figure that one out. And then auto-scaling. There's one team and group of ITV that explicitly wanted auto-scaling. So we've just been speaking about common platform. Now we need to talk about Love Island. Who here has heard of Love Island? Yeah, good. The rest of you are lying. So Love Island, the directors and producers asked me not to reveal this secret formula. This is the formula to Love Island. It's basically hot people plus sun plus voting from the great British public plus drama, multiplied by drama, got to multiply by things, equals eyeballs. And I promise you, internally, we actually refer to viewers as eyeballs, which I think is terrible, equals dollars or profit. Great, so that's basically the formula for Love Island. And it is quite popular. So to give you an idea, in the last 12 months, the 2 most popular things that have been simulcast on the ITV hub were the 2 England World Cup matches last year. I'm sure you can probably guess, I've kind of like loaded it, what number 3 was. It was the premiere of Love Island a couple of weeks ago. So here it is in terms of audience figures. Back in like 2015, 500,000, and it's basically kind of gone up quite a bit since then. So that last year we had 4 million viewers kind of regularly watching that stuff. And for an ITV2 audience, that's absolutely kind of colossal. Online, we regularly get best part of 1 million people watching on simulcasts. And if you don't know, simulcast is when you watch live online as well. And so what does that look from a graph perspective? Because everyone loves a good graph. It looks a bit like this. See if you can spot when Love Island started. If you can't guess, it's there. It has a massive impact on our traffic because the hub is really, really busy. Anyway, we've got about 30 million monthly active users. So it's already a busy site. It's really popular with the 16 to 24-year-old demographic. Is there anyone in the room who's actually in that audience, in that demographic? There's good, great, congratulations. Trying to talk about you now. So that demographic, they really like their mobile phones. They like to watch programs on their mobile phones rather than television. And Love Island is one of the first programs we've actually had where it's been more popular online and over IP than it has been actually on air. The other thing about 16 to 24-year-olds, I'm told by our marketing teams, is they're quite impatient. And what does that matter? So World Cup, you watch the pre-game, you warm up, you kind of click on, you go off and get a cup of tea. Love Island is a bit more pacey. So here's another graph. So this is kind of like traffic, and you can kind of see they don't join like half an hour before. They aren't even thinking about joining 10 minutes before. So here's some traffic. Okay, we've kind of got that many kind of requests per second kind of coming in. Okay, we've kind of doubled it by now as well. We're kind of coming in, and each minute it's kind of going up again. And we're getting again, and now at 9 o'clock we're getting about 3,500 requests per second because that's when they join, and that's on one particular API. That's happening across loads of APIs at the same time. So it's quite big. It's not too bad. And online wanted this to be the new normal, because it was. They wanted this to be BAU. They didn't want to have a white glove and put a load of engineering effort into handling that. Because when it first happened a few years ago, it took us by surprise. We don't want to be surprised again. And so Dave Smith, who's the principal developer for online, said, Tom, I want Love Island to be like a non-event by the summer. And this was back in January. And he says, I'm going to do an OKR, a kind of objective and key result of by the end of March, we want one service in production running on an infinitely scalable service. I said, Dave, you don't know what infinitely means if you really mean that, but we can work on it. And so we said we're going to work on it together. We're going to set that kind of a big, hairy, audacious goal. We aligned our MVP to his OKR. And we said, what do you need, Tom? I said, great, can I have some developers? And he said, great, have Luke and Yuri. Here they are. I added some platform engineers from my team, Estathios and Tom. There they are. We IV pushed coffee into them. And I tempted them with what I like to call baked motivation, which many people refer to as cake. And that was our development team for kind of CPV2. Looks great, right? And so what do we do in terms of transparency? We said we're going to have a public roadmap and backlog. We already had one anyway, we just hadn't told anyone about it. That's marketing. We created a Slack channel just for V2 so everyone could kind of see what was going on. We created a contributors group, which is a lot more exciting than it sounds, because we were going to call it a working group or steering group for a while. But the idea is this would be representatives from our development teams from each business area to say, that's a really good idea, can we do this? Help us prioritize the backlog and actually say, look, you're totally involved in the development. You tell us what we should be developing for you. And we set a vision, because you've got to, because we're a big company. And so here is this, provide a brilliant hosting and development platform, quite simple, and development platform, because the first time around we'd forgotten that bit silly, but we didn't have a huge amount of time. This was back in January. We had until the end of March to kind of do the MVP. So we had to go for evolution over revolution. We couldn't boil the ocean and change everything. It had to be an upgrade, not a re-platform. It had to be value-driven. They had to maximize the return on the investment, I was told by my boss. And so we had this concept of the minimum viable change. What is the smallest amount of change you can do for the most benefit? And we knew going into this world there'd be lots of known unknowns and loads of unknown unknowns. And that's basically risk. We couldn't afford to take such a big risk, so we limited the change, the minimum viable change. And where do we think we could get the most benefit from in just 3 months? Well, we thought it was by changing our runtime and scheduler. So back then on V1, we were deploying, kind of similar to the Depop folks, onto AWS EC2 instances. We had an AMI, but it wasn't kind of baked, but it was basically a generic AMI. We would then run Puppet over the top of it, we'd pull down RPMs, and it would come into load. It'd take quite a while. It wasn't great. The config was in Puppet, and we said, let's find a way of fixing that as well. And ultimately, there'd be less stuff to maintain. So we're big fans of Jeff Bezos and his technology, apparently. So basically, we had a fight. We had Fargate, or ECS Fargate, versus EKS. Which one should we go for? And we actually looked at the various capabilities of the two of them. We looked at kind of how mature they were. We looked at the community. We decided how sexy we thought they were. We weighted those various properties. We scored them. And by a nose, EKS kind of came out on front, actually, partly driven by the auto-scaling. We found Fargate couldn't auto-scale the way we needed it to. Great, so we selected it. We kind of had this another concept of like nailing it before you scale it, which sounds terrible, but the idea was we'd do an MVP with one team, and then we'd do like an alpha with a couple of teams, and then we'd do a beta with the contributors group, and then we'd go gold and general availability, and everyone could kind of come on board. The idea being that we'd actually kind of share it with people once it was ready. Again, similar to what the Depop folk were kind of saying as well. Another rule we kind of came up with was optimize for the common case. Kind of think what the most obvious thing to do is and work for that. And when we were looking with our developers, we realized actually most of them actually weren't massively interested in Kubernetes. Can you believe? They were outcome driven. They didn't really care about how the sausages were made. They just wanted to eat the sausages, right? They really just wanted their microservices to be delivered in production, reliably, securely, quickly, and for it to auto-scale. How we achieved that, they didn't care. And so we kind of really had this concept of there being an easy mode on V2, which we thought was about 80% of the users, and then hard mode. The people who did care about Helm, and they did care about Kubernetes, and they did kind of care about workers and things like that. And we thought, how can we kind of hide and abstract the complexity of Kubernetes from those developers with a very, very thin slice tool. Because I'm sure you're all familiar with stuff like this. You know, it looks great. It's YAML and YAML and YAML and YAML and a recursive loop of YAML. It's not kind of great. So I said to Estathios, my principal engineer, who happens to be Greek, and Kubernetes is obviously Greek for Helm, so I said, like, Estathios, what's the Greek word for simple? And he said, Aplo. And so basically, Aplo is our tool to turn that into that. So as a developer, if you don't care about all of that and you're willing to follow the convention over the configuration, you pass in a service manifest file that explains a few kind of facts about the service. You pass in a few environment variables if you want to be 12-factor, or actually a lot of our teams, again, they really like immutable stuff, and they can consider config to be part of the kind of the immutability boundary. So they actually bake in the various environmental config into, not the secrets, into the thing, and we poke in environment variables telling them where they're running, which they quite like, but we also support 12-factor. And what that will do is effectively kind of spit out the YAML which goes into kubectl. Going back to the point about kind of minimum viable change, this is how stuff looks on V1, kind of pretty basic and traditional. DNS pointing to an ELB, pointing to an auto-scaling group. Again, minimum viable change. What's the smallest thing we could change to reduce the risk? Again, it's basically the same thing. An ELB, although mostly we actually were on ALBs, but we had to move back to ELBs, into a service, into a deployment, and everything's great. So the MVP, did we make it? Thoughts? Well, I'm going to ask Tom, my platform engineer who's working on the team. Tom, did we make it? Yeah, we did. We absolutely kind of did. We managed to get a deploy from 0 to 60, from literally no EKS experience in January through to a service running kind of very reliably in production by the end of March. We had cool mission patches for all the teams as well, which was great. And we also, the cake was promised, the cake was delivered. I actually got the mission patch made into a cake, which I think actually cost more than the development budget for it, because I had no idea cakes would be so expensive, but it was delicious. And here's the team. We kind of got Luke, Tom, Estathios, and Yuri there, looking really happy. I think partly because they've basically just made the MVP, mostly because they're about to eat that delicious cake. So, kind of benefits the team. They can self-serve more. There's less of the BAU. Creating a microservice, changing a deployment, doing configuration and bits and bobs like that. They didn't need to use Puppet. They didn't need to use Terraform. They didn't need to speak to us anymore to be able to do that. So good for them. Cycle time is 10x faster. We're actually getting into production now in about a minute or less. Fewer failed deploys, we're relying on Kubernetes to do that, and 30% more efficient, so we're spending kind of less money on it as well. And we can auto-scale. And so Dave Smith, the principal engineer I mentioned, he sent out this email to his team after we'd kind of done the MVP, and I'll highlight this bit kind of saying, the performance is better, it's cheaper to run, the config is nicer, the deployment times are delightful, and the scaling is sublime. And Dave, thank you, the check is in the post. But really, that's what he did. And the team did that heading for this kind of June deadline for Love Island. And so I made up these figures, but it's actually kind of broadly what happened. We went from V1 at the bottom really quickly. They decided the safest way to get through Love Island was to get as many services as over as possible in that particular period. And so what that meant, on Monday, the 3rd of June, Tony, I think I'm going to run over behind you. Yeah. Monday, the 3rd of June, 2019, 8:01. Love Island premiere night. Exciting times. This happens in Slack. Dan O, was anything changed around 3:30 today? User auth, the thing that you use to log into the hub, been returning a steady stream of 500 errors. So what had happened actually, as part of some work, a developer had accidentally moved a 400 series error into a 500 series error. So basically it was a false positive. We were seeing lots of red in our graphs, but actually wasn't causing kind of any user-facing impact. But we were in the Slack channel. We were half an hour away or so from kind of the biggest night of the year. The whole world was, well, not the whole world, but the whole country was literally watching. And we decided actually to make the change, to actually get a one-line change into production and push it out there, because going into Love Island with noise in the graphs was going to be a risk in terms of situational awareness. And so we kind of made the change, we approved it, everyone said, let's do it, we pressed the button, there, deployed pod finished. And actually the elapsed time there was about a minute. Not a single blip, 99th percentile stayed exactly the same, and everything was great. So later on that night, Love Island happened. You can kind of see the traffic there, and you can also instantly spot the advert breaks as well when people kind of go off for tea. And we saw it doing exactly what it was designed to do in a very, very boring fashion. So taking it through to today, well, what does it mean? You know, the problem recap I kind of mentioned before. The lonely PE problem. Well, what we actually think is not today, but in time, it's going to allow us to actually reduce the operational overhead. The BAU will be able to be done by the developers. They're able to self-serve more. And we think it means from a platform engineering perspective, we can take a step back. We can move from being dedicated to being designated. So you'll still have a go-to person, you'll still have someone who knows your stack, but they may not be embedded in your team. And they'll be spending more of their time working with platform engineers, kind of maximizing the platform day to day. So we are going to get there, we're not there just yet. Platform engineer, we're going to move towards PaaS again because more of these things are self-serve and it's less ITV custom stuff, it's more Kubernetes and Google stuff. It's kind of a benefit there. The developer experience has definitely kind of improved. People are much happier. And obviously in terms of yesterday's tech, we're now kind of running all singing, all dancing on Kubernetes. So we're really cool now and we are hiring. But what's next? So that work stream, that runtime work stream is into beta, so people are adopting it. So now we're going to start thinking about what's next. So should it be observability? Is it time to put Sensu and Elk and Telegraph and Influx and Grafana out to pasture and look at this data dog? Or maybe we should be looking at workflow. Is it time to put a bullet in Jenkins, because we all want to, and replace it with something like Circle CI or Jenkins X, its evil twin? But we're going to decide that, and the contributors group are going to decide that. So I'll leave you with a few final thoughts. Number one, optimize for the common case. Kind of see what that kind of thing, if you keep making exceptions for that edge or corner case, you add cognitive load forevermore. So if you add a config option where it can be A or B, people are going to have to think about A or B forevermore. So really think, actually, can I rely on convention over configuration wherever possible? And your last resort should be introducing an override. So convention over configuration, optimize for the common case. Focus on the minimum viable change. We kind of spoke before, actually, about adding like service mesh. Everyone said, oh, we should go and do Istio and Envoy. So like, that's a massive change. We don't need it right now. What's the smallest thing we can do to kind of get the benefit and go for that? You're never too late to do the right thing. Going up in front of the development community and actually kind of saying, we've screwed up, we need to change this, was the best thing we've ever done, because actually kind of restored a relationship that has slowly eroded over time. And then finally, the kind of point I mentioned before, do something when you can afford to, not when you can't afford not to. Because those musts and those shoulds may not seem quite important this quarter, but eventually they will be. And often for your developers and your customers, those are the delighters. Those are the really cool things. Those are that chatbot you get to do on a random Friday afternoon when you carve out some time. And they're the things that kind of really spark joy in the systems you operate. Thank you all very much.